For the year 2020, I'm making a video review for every new movie I watch, whether in theaters or at home, and on April 11th, I watched Federico Fellini's 8½. Welcome to my year in movies. This is Talking to Myself. For this review, I wanted to do something a little different, not just with my appearance, but I knew that I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I, a person who knows nothing about the filmmaking process, a filmbo, if you will, tried to discuss this movie without having a plan. Because when I describe the film, even before I get into the synopsis, when I describe the film as an avant-garde black and white Italian surrealist dramedy, that sounds lofty and unattainable. But despite that intimidating aura, I found this classic, fundamental piece of cinema very accessible and very enjoyable. Now, part of what may have been working in my favor is the fact that I have seen the musical Nine, or the film adaptation thereof. And the musical Nine is loosely based on the Fellini film, so the major story beats, the kind of fantastical atmosphere was something that was in the back of my mind. In an attempt to show that this movie is suitable for members of the unwashed masses such as myself, as well as the highbrow cinephile community, I wanted to bridge the gap by examining how the things I liked fit into the greater discourse of the movie. In case it isn't obvious, this review has been heavily supplemented with the opinions of professionals. 8½" follows Italian film director Guido Anselmi, who, after having a bit of a nervous breakdown, tries to figure out what to do about his next film, which he describes as a semi-autobiographical science fiction fare. Along the way, he fantasizes about the women in his life, and he tries to reconcile both past and present relationships. There is cool, and then there is Marcello Mastroianni as Guido Anselmi cool. I mean, the sunglasses, the suits, the brilliance, the swagger. I mean, it does not get better than that. Oh, but it does. That coolness starts off on really shaky footing, and what I appreciate is that despite the fact that Anselmi is effortlessly cool, the first time we see his face in full light is after he's been to the doctor. He's haggard and sickly, and there are dark circles under his eyes. It's really effective. And I mean, it doesn't take a film buff to kind of see that while Mastroianni is playing a guy named Guido Anselmi, it's pretty clear he's playing a version of Fellini. And this wasn't the first time Mastroianni had served as kind of a conduit through which Fellini could bare his soul to his audience. And the whole film is a poignant look into Fellini's inner thoughts. Talking through his on-screen alter ego, Mastroianni once again, Fellini turned 8½" into his most reflective and one of his funniest films. It was a black and white diary entry, left open to be read by his fans, a stream of consciousness exhumation of an artist's past in the hope that he may find the key to unlock the future, somewhere inside the riddle of it all. What strikes me about this portrayal of himself is the fact that Fellini doesn't go for a completely flattering picture. Maybe it's because I haven't really paid attention to a lot of self-insert characters, but there's a lot of little things that dismantle the myth of the brilliant, suave auteur. And for a man obsessed with women, he isn't very good with them. He's often awkward and fumbles through conversations. In some scenes, he seems almost shy. In one particularly poignant scene, it shows that he really doesn't know how to treat women, and not necessarily that he treats them badly either. In the fantasy, we see Guido at his grandmother's villa from his childhood, but now the villa is filled with all of the women in his life. Women he's loved, women he's admired, and even just women he wants to sleep with. They throw in a flight attendant that he recalls from one flight. He can juggle all of these women finally. But eventually the women rebel because they realize they shouldn't be expected to follow rules that Guido himself can't even follow. He has to become the ringmaster of his own sad, weird circus, literally whipping them to shape as if they were trained lionesses. It doesn't feel like a triumphant moment for him. If anything, it satirizes the idea that a womanizing director can get whatever he wants just because he's a genius. And for a man painted as a visionary, he's called a hack. He struggles to make decisions, and he caves under the mounting pressure in a really surprising way. He doesn't pull through at the end. He pulls the plug. After a press conference ends with him symbolically shooting himself, he tells all of his producers and crew that they'll try again next time. There are a lot of movies I can think of that use the idea of the fraud or the liar, where they somehow manage to save the day at the last minute. But seeing this film take that in a completely different direction was very refreshing. It's a bizarre sigh of relief. It's almost a reassuring message. 8½" is, in my estimation, one of the most meta films ever made. The title itself is a reference to how many movies Fellini had made, with 8½" being the eighth and a half film made. Alexander Sasonki writes for the Criterion Channel, if the mark of modernism in art is self-reference, eight and a half surely goes beyond any predecessor in having itself as the subject. Self-referential enough, but only the beginning. Eight and a half is a film about making a film, and the film being made is eight and a half. In making eight and a half, the blending of fantasy and reality is an important detail. Duh. But it's more than just an artistic choice. In making the film one part autobiography and one part surrealist dream, Fellini is contending with his past as an apprentice to neorealist visionary Roberto Rossellini. In some ways, he was always walking away from his neorealist roots. Even from his earliest films, it's clear that Fellini is a man with big ideas, and those big ideas kind of culminated in eight and a half. Maybe this is me being presumptuous, but Fellini almost seems scared in eight and a half. There's a sense of fear permeating throughout the whole film. The kind of uncertainty that befalls someone who's been successful in the past, but is faced with the possibility that their genius had run out, or worse, that their victories had separated them from what made them successful. Like Guido, Fellini's success had cut him off from his roots in history and the everyday world. He has no ideas, and so his theme became himself and his own creativity. Now, as much as I talk about the film being meta and as much self-referencing as the movie does, Fellini never strove to make anything truly autobiographical. Thinly veiled allusions to his life for one thing, but to make a film truly autobiographical, he said, was an overly facile liquidation, a hasty classification. It seems to me that I have invented almost everything. Childhood, character, nostalgias, dreams, memories, for the pleasure of being able to recount them. Federico Fellini left a strong impression on a number of revered directors, including and perhaps most especially Martin Scorsese, who says that he watches eight and a half at least once a year. Eight and a half has always been a touchstone for me in so many ways. The freedom, the sense of innovation, the underlying rigor, and the deep core of longing, the bewitching physical pull of the camera movements and the compositions. And Scorsese isn't the only one. Directly or indirectly, the legacy of eight and a half permeates a lot of introspective films from directors wondering where they're going to go next, directors who ponder their legacy. The influence of Fellini can be seen in Pedro Almodovar's reflective and deeply personal film Pain and Glory, in Todd Haynes' inventive and experimental Bob Dylan biopic I'm Not There, and in Charlie Kaufman's monumentally ambitious Synecdoche, New York. All directors are not without their detractors, but I was kind of surprised to see the kind of criticisms levied at Fellini's work. One critic brushed off his work as being empty and vapid, merely masquerading as deep art. Boston Review critic Alan Stone said Fellini emphasized images over ideas. And despite my tendency to prefer films with a more linear, direct narrative, and despite these criticisms, Fellini made some real magic with eight and a half. John Powers, writing for NPR, says that Fellini's work captures the boisterous and beautiful messiness of life. I don't know what I expected to feel watching eight and a half, but over the course of reading about Fellini and his contributions, I came to love the film. I left the film with a deep appreciation for the creativity and the imagination. There's so much to unpack that requires a second viewing that I'm already looking forward to. It was certainly an adjustment. I spent the first 15 minutes watching inches away from the screen because as a non-Italian speaker, I couldn't figure out why the words I was hearing didn't match the words I was seeing. I later learned it's because no sound was recorded live on set. They dubbed the whole thing in post. And at first it was distracting, but as I continued watching, it almost contributed to the dreamlike effect. It was almost like these were all people in Guido's mind and he was filling in the voices himself. Is it my new favorite film? No, but it is a film I know I'll appreciate the longer I think about it and the more I watch. It's a film I respect as a critical stepping stone to the world of cinema we know today. It took risks, it challenged conventions, and it ultimately is a love letter from a director to his many passions. And for that, I say, grazie Fellini. This has been My Year in Movies. Thank you for watching.